But first, we're going to go to our top story of the day, and that's going to do with changes at the top for Slink.io and what's been going on there for the customers. And so to join us today, we're going to have, of course, the one, the only Clarissa Haas. Clarissa, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
We've got more updates coming out of both Slink.io and CoreFund Capital, neither of which were good news for these companies the last 2 weeks. Let's start off with Slink. We know that the CEO has now been officially fired from his position, correct?
Yes, and he's also been removed as chairman of the board. So that was a big step because as the chairman, he also, and CEO, he controlled all of the money from the investors in some of the funds. So, so it was a big step. He had been suspended, but, pending an investigation. And now we're just waiting to kind of find out more about what that internal investigation found.
So, Clarissa, in the wake of this news, where does Slink kind of go from here?
Well, if you talk to some of the sales people inside, they're, still, they said, we got a great product. We're going to try to make it last, we're going to, and then others are saying they're, going to lay off more people and attempt to sell it off to a company in a similar space. So it's kind of, some people are hearing different things about the future of Slink, but they all say one thing is that, kind of the reputation has been tarnished, when, by Kirshner not paying the employees some for almost 3 months.
I think that that's a good point to bring up is kind of the reputation about companies when the heads of them, either lie about the product or misuse their funds. And when we saw this happen with Trevor Milton, of course, the indicted founder of Nikola, and kind of the tarnish that left on Nikola, the company was really able to now separate itself from Trevor Milton and really kind of make this comeback. But I think a lot of that has to do because they had a true physical product in the Nikola truck that they were pumping out, and they had kind of this physicality to their business. Slink.io is in the freight tech business, is in the other side of things where their product isn't necessarily tangible, where people can see, I guess, kind of the progress moving forward. Do you think that that's going to have any kind of hindrance on them being able to kind of shelve off the reputation of Kirshner now going forward?
I think it's unclear at this point. I know, based on former employees that said that, Kirshner said that they had 15 customers when they only really had 3 core customers that were using their product, but because it was customized to each individual company. But really everybody, I've talked to some of the people that were involved from the ground up and say it's a really good product. It just didn't have the chance. It had the $70 million, including a Goldman Sachs, $60 million led investment, but it just never, got the money that it really needed to take off and for it to be utilized to other companies. So it's going to be an interesting next few months from what I hear.
And Clarissa, with Kirshner out, is he just off completely scot-free, or will there be any type of repercussions financially or even potentially legally later on down the line?
Well, there are attorneys have already filed, wrongful termination suits, and they're, attempting to pierce the corporate veil where in cases where kind of sometimes the money of the company is intermingled with the finances of, executives of a company, which, that still has to be worked out and no charges have been filed yet, and so, but they're hoping that, what some attorneys are saying is that company money was used to kind of fund Kirshner's lifestyle. And so that to recoup that money, they are attempting to go back after Kirshner's personal assets.
That's going to be something that's interesting to watch going forward as well. And Clarissa, let's move on to that second story of the day. CoreFund Capital, which we talked about last week, is kind of not being able or going under really, and leaving hundreds of drivers with the inability to pay and get paid, possibly forcing them out of the industry. Have we learned more details about what's going on, and is there a bit of a lifeline being thrown to these drivers now?
It's still really confusing. A receiver has been appointed and has gone in and been able to access the computer system, and they're working to get CoreFund customers, a lot of small business truckers paid, and releasing them from their notice, like their UCC liens that on their equipment and other things, if they want to move forward with a different factoring company, because that's the fear, is that if they stay with CoreFund and this feud doesn't end, that they might wind up in the same position in a month or two and find themselves having to park their trucks or not be able to pay their drivers until they get access to capital again. So, but the receivers, has been going in and, but the hundreds of messages and some duplicates, but the receiver said that the company is viable, that there is money to pay those that want to stay with CoreFund. But I found that some factoring companies, like rival factoring companies, already have started factoring the accounts receivable of these truckers that were with CoreFund just to keep them going. But in that case, like they'll be, like I talked, when the receiver's PR person we spoke on Friday, said that means that there'll be a second lien, that CoreFund will still have the first lien against the truck drivers, their equipment, and not the new factoring company. So that may be a logistics issue about if, when everybody goes to get paid, what will happen.
So Clarissa, when truckers decide to use a factoring company, are they contractually bound just to one company, or do they have that option to go out and seek out other options? Or is this kind of a unique use case where CoreFund had these issues and their lien was almost, I want to say, kind of invalidated, and then it's validated, it's in that like murky area, so they were allowed to go seek that secondary assistance from a secondary factoring company? And could this eventually maybe come back and bite drivers who decided to do that if they were contractually bound to CoreFund?
Well, that's kind of the unknown, and there's going to be, I think, some legal challenges in talking to some attorneys on this that are going to say, well, you were basically shut down, and hundreds of small businesses, potentially could have lost their livelihoods as well. But I think it will be interesting to see going forward how it all works. And attorneys are, they all have unique agreements where I think with CoreFund they had a year contractual obligation, and then if you didn't respond or anything, it just renewed for the next year. And some during this period where the company was kind of shut down, the renewal started again. So now they were kind of in that limbo: is, can I go with a different factoring company, even though I did submit information saying I didn't want to continue with them? There was nobody in the office to answer, my emails or phone calls. So I think it's the gray area, I think, for a lot of attorneys and that are on behalf of factoring companies and small business truckers who are looking into this.
So Clarissa, it seems like there's definitely a lot of factors involved in this situation here. But when we look at this current legal situation, are there any other scenarios that have been similar to this that really can be kind of, similar to expect what will play out here? Or is this truly unique?
Well, when I talked to Jason Medley with Spencer Fain, he's representing, I think, over 100 small business carriers now. He said that this is a very rare occurrence in the factoring world, and that sometimes it's better to go with a larger company that has more of a, executive, several executive, levels that this would have to go through before something like this happened, instead of just a few, core people in charge of the whole operation. So, but they said this is a rarity in the industry, that it just abruptly goes dark and with no communication.
And rounding it out with that, the rarity happened because of some beef between two brothers. How did it get to this point? And is there a chance of reconciliation between the brothers, or is that kind of out the window now?
Really, no one, attorneys for both sides refused to respond to any messages. So it's really hard to understand what happened that led to this. But yeah, it's, and it's kind of some employees are on one side and you hear from others that are on the other brother's side. So it's really confusing to figure out, what occurred, other than what I could find, a dispute over a family trust and setting up a new trust. And that kind of that happened on July 12th, and then the company shut down on the 18th.
Clarissa, coming with us with two hard-hitting stories. This is awesome. Thanks so much for being here this morning. We'll definitely be sure to follow up with you again throughout the week and next week as these situations develop.
Okay, thanks for having me.
As always, and you can find the details of those stories up on freightwaves.com.